So on to the next question. How did we get here to lose this meaning in luxury? What is the historical trajectory of the luxury industry, and how did we arrive at this moment now where luxury brands have lost their meaning and their inherent essence of value?
Well, historical trajectory, how much time do we have? I could be endless hours talking to you, but I'm not going to bore you with the historical details. I have written an article on the evolution of luxury, and you can find that article on my LinkedIn profile under articles. And in that article, I described the evolution and the historical trajectory of luxury since the Roman Empire up till nowadays. And so please go to my please go to read my article for details. Now, how did we get here to this loss of meaning? Luxury brands used to be independent, small family businesses created by people with exceptional taste and love for craftsmanship and art and culture. I mean, they were all independent, small houses, small businesses, Vuitton, Chanel, Saint Laurent, Loewe, and some of them are 100, 150, 200 years old. Some others are Dior, Saint Laurent are 60 to 70 years old, Givenchy, 60 years old. Anyway, but for some reason, and for several reasons, in the late 80s, early 90s, the first conglomerates starting to emerge. First, Pinot Printemps, which is now known as Kering Group, later LVMH Group, and then Richemont in Switzerland in '88. And these family houses, these small, independent, luxury, refined family businesses, for several reasons, they started slowly selling their businesses to these conglomerates. Either because they were in financial trouble sometimes, because these small independent businesses, they were very product-oriented, quality-oriented, symbology-oriented. They would create and craft beautiful products, but they were not exactly financial literate, and they would lack the financial knowledge to manage the business. And sometimes in a crisis like the one we had 10 years ago, or the one we're about to face now, these small independent businesses would not survive, and they would ultimately sell their businesses to these conglomerates. But that was not the only reason. They sometimes sold their businesses because they lacked offspring, descent. They didn't have heirs. Their children, either they didn't have any children, or their children, they didn't want to go in the business. So they were getting old. They didn't know what they didn't have any family to take care of the business, so they would sell, or merely for growth reasons, because these small independent family businesses would not grow without on themselves and without being part of a big group. So they started selling, and then in the late 90s, early 2000s, the middle classes around the world, there was a sort of a social revolution. The middle classes around the world started emerging in the US, in Latin America, in Europe as well, and then later in Asia, especially in China. And then slowly, middle classes started emerging, started making more money, and for status reasons, they started buying luxury without understanding it. So they were merely buying luxury for the label, for the tangible part, to show off. And they would not always understand the symbology, the meaning, the culture behind any product. An example, Mont Blanc is one of my favorite brands. And apart from the standard pens like this one I have, I got it from my birthday last year. I love it, but it's a very standard one. It's a normal one. But Mont Blanc has this limited edition of beautiful pens inspired in the life and works of people in arts and science and history as well. So there is the Shakespeare pen, there is the Marie Antoinette pen, there is the Oscar Wilde pen, there is the Dostoevsky pen. So there are pens inspired in the life and works of writers, of kings, of politicians who shaped history, of scientists, philosophers, you name it. And each pen is unique in the design, and each pen has details of the life and work of that personality. So the Shakespeare pen has a very small skull in the clip. And unless you're familiar with Hamlet, that skull says nothing to you. You have money.
It doesn't mean anything.
You've made, yes, it doesn't mean anything
Doesn't
to
make
you.
a connection.
Doesn't make a connection, doesn't give you goosebumps, doesn't make you wet eyes. So the Shakespeare pen is for Shakespeare lovers who will buy the pen and who will indulge and appreciate observing the pen and discovering the details.
Maybe even remembering the first time they read Hamlet. Yeah.
Oh yes, yes. Or seen it on Broadway or on the West End. So that's what I mean. I mean, the loss of meaning was mainly because of this social revolution. On the one hand, middle classes emerged in Brazil, in China, in the US, in Mexico, in South Europe mainly. And then on the other hand, almost simultaneously, big conglomerates, big groups, financial economic groups started buying brands. LVMH has more than 70 brands. Kering has more than 15 to 20 brands. And these are financial groups. They have shareholders. They have to make a profit. So they started pushing sales. And they need to sell.
Motivation. Yeah.
It's a different motivation. So in a way, that's the meaning and the intangibility has been a little bit lost. I mean, it is there from the product side and the offering side.
But if you are not if you're not familiar with the context, which is the operative
if you're not
word,
familiar with the context, if you are not an educated consumer, you don't understand the details.
Yeah.
So
it's actually not
my opinion.
This is actually quite an interesting point because it's not luxury industry's fault that luxury was like, partly it is because of the short-term mindset and like pushing for profit, like sales for profit, but it's also not entirely their fault that luxury was sort of relegated to this, you know, status-seeking symbolism and just like acquiring, you know, like luxury objects to seem of a higher status. It's also partly because of this utter decontextualization. Because if you don't understand the culture and the knowledge behind it, it's not going to mean as much to you. And therefore, you know, if it's a luxury object or an object of like a piece of art, even stripped away from this essential meaning that is inherent in the thing that you're looking at and that you're acquiring, if you are not the one to appreciate it and understand what's behind it, it's just a mere object, and then obviously is just to show off. But that's not the primary
role of luxury, and it never was supposed to be, which is something that Angela just talked about in her excursion into the history of meritocracy and aristocracy.